it is Adrienne Lawrence, and I'd like to welcome you into TYT's The Conversation. And this time, we have a face you may be pretty familiar with. That is Mr. Andy Hale. Thank you for joining us, Andy.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Andy, now I know you do a lot in terms of getting people who have been wrongly convicted, end up getting them their freedom back, and that there has been a big case recently that was so incredibly significant in Missouri, Kevin Strickland. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Incredible case. You know, Kevin Strickland was in prison for 43 years, just got released last week. What I thought was striking about it was that the prosecuting attorney's office was so involved in reinvestigating the case and looking into the case and conducting a month-long investigation that ultimately led to Kevin's exoneration. That was so great to see because oftentimes you just don't see that kind of initiative or interest in overturning a really big, long case. And I thought that was just stunning. And I was so impressed by what the office did to investigate the case.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, that is so incredibly rare because generally prosecution offices, they do not want to at all kind of look at the errors that were potentially made. And can you speak to the errors in this case?
Yeah, in this case, you know, it was witness misidentification. We know, according to the Innocence Project, out of the 350 DNA exonerations, 70% of those involve some kind of witness misidentification. It's one of the biggest factors in wrongful convictions, witnesses just getting it wrong. And it's also a case where there was no physical evidence linking Kevin Strickland to the crime. It was all based on the testimony of this one witness. She originally said that she did not know the third offender. Kevin Strickland was somebody she had known for several years. She wound up talking to one of her friends who said, hey, this kind of sounds like Kevin Strickland. And I think that got in her mind that maybe it was Kevin Strickland. But it really is just a sad case of a witness getting it wrong. And I think what we've seen this before is once witnesses identify somebody, it's very hard to undo it. I mean, she reached out to the Midwest Innocence Project in 2009 and said, hey, I think I got this wrong. And people are afraid to come forward. But witness misidentification is unfortunately one of the biggest factors in wrongful convictions today.
Yes, and unfortunately, you know, having people actually come forward and admit that they made a grave mistake, that's something that is very rare as well. And to advocate for the individual that they wrongly had accused. And so in this case, when she came forward and said that, hey, I think I got this wrong, can you speak to kind of her journey in terms of getting Mr. Strickland his freedom?
So she first sent an email to the Midwest Innocence Project in 2009. Now she passed away several years ago, but according to family and friends, you know, this has been something she had been talking about and wanting to do. But to the prosecutor's office's credit, I've got, you know, the prosecutor wrote, it's an 8-page letter that they wrote to the attorneys for Kevin Strickland, and it talks in there about once they found out that the eyewitness had basically said she got it wrong, they went in and did a whole investigation to see if there was any other evidence corroborating guilt or innocence. And they, you know, I think one of the other strong factors was one of the co-defendants, Kevin Bell, at his guilty hearing plea back in the day in 1979, he said Kevin Strickland was not there. I mean, he volunteered that information in court. He wound up identifying all 4 people that were involved in the shooting. And I think one of the problems that happened is there were red flags back in 1978 and 1979 that people did not follow up on. When Mr. Bell said that Kevin Strickland was not there, and in fact, what he said was, I'm pleading guilty because he was so concerned because Kevin Strickland got convicted, and he's like, and he wasn't even there. So Mr. Bell was like, I don't want to have a trial. But back then, when he said that, there should have been a reinvestigation into Kevin's case. It was credible testimony. He identified the other people, and so you always see red flags, but you don't have people that take it seriously. That's been a historic problem.
Absolutely. And so Mr. Strickland had been, I believe it's one of the longest cases of individuals being released or exonerated. And so for 43 years, that's a long time. And when you think about what kind of compensation is this man going to get, not that you could actually pay someone in monetary or any other kind of value to take away that long of their life, but in terms of what the state will give him, Missouri, do you know what that looks like?
Well, Missouri will give him nothing. In Missouri, compensation is only to someone who is exonerated by DNA evidence. Kevin's case does not involve a DNA exoneration, so there's not an avenue for state compensation. The other difficult part for Mr. Strickland is it's not a case of police misconduct. It's a case of a witness getting it wrong. There may be a component of, was she forced to pick him out? I don't know enough about that. But really, they should have a system in place in all states where, like in Illinois, we have a system. You can get a certificate of innocence from the court. Does not have to be a DNA exoneration. And then you can get state compensation if the court finds you are actually innocent based on the length of time you were incarcerated. There should be a way for somebody like a Kevin Strickland to receive compensation. And even the state compensation statutes in Illinois, the maximum is about $250,000. I mean, that is a pittance for what this man went through. But I was encouraged to see that his GoFundMe page has raised, I think, well over $1.5 million, over 20,000 people contributing to that fund to help Kevin Strickland get on his feet. I thought that was amazing because people reaching out to try to help him, get back on his feet. That was incredible.
Yes, absolutely. That's absolutely fantastic. And the thing is, he's probably a lot better off with that GoFundMe account, in part because he doesn't have to pay legal fees for it. So that's a good thing. Be a lot better than any kind of reward in court. But in terms of cases that you're working on, since you specialize in the exoneration area and wrongful convictions, can you talk a little bit about what you are currently facing?
I've got a big one right now. It was a case, my client was named Chester Weger, Weger. He got convicted in 1960. Let me say that again, 1960, of a triple murder at the Starved Rock Park here in Illinois. And I've been representing Mr. Weger for the last several years. I believe he's innocent. He was incarcerated for over 60 years. And we just won our motion to do DNA testing, which was so exciting. And I was literally in court yesterday when that order was entered. We are going to have that evidence shipped out next week to a laboratory in Virginia. We're going to have a bunch of physical evidence that still exists from the crime scene, hairs and other evidence. We're going to test that. And I got my fingers crossed. There's also going to be a big special on the case appearing on HBO December 14th and 15th called The Starved Rock Murders, talking about the case. So that's one. I mean, it's unfathomable to think, somebody who's 82 years old now and spent 60 years in prison, and that person could be innocent. So that's been the one that's taken up most of my time. And I've got some other ones. I just wish I had more time in the day. And I've got another couple I'm working on for some gentlemen that I think are innocent. These are difficult cases to prove. I mean, it's so time consuming, and I feel guilty if I'm not spending every waking moment trying to advance the ball for these guys. But there's no more rewarding feeling, I think, to a lawyer than getting somebody out of prison who shouldn't be there.
Yes, I can imagine that must be so incredibly heartwarming, as well as just feeling like you are part of the justice system and getting justice actually done, which is really big. And I know right now that there's a lot of talk in the media, at least, about a gentleman who has just been essentially exonerated for the accused rape that he had faced of the woman author. Forgive me, I have forgotten her name. Yes.
It was the Netflix Netflix producer who, when he was working on the Netflix special, felt like this just doesn't add up. It just doesn't make sense. And it was remarkable that you've got this Netflix producer who basically, had the interest and the compassion and the dedication to spend the time to really dig into the case and to figure that out. It was remarkable. And we sit here today, according to the Innocence Project, their conservative estimates are 1% of the population, prison population, could be wrongfully convicted. The prison population, according to the Prison Policy Initiative, is 2.3 million people. I mean, we could have 23,000 people currently incarcerated who shouldn't be there. So it's important work. I just hope that states' attorneys' offices can follow the lead of Missouri. That conviction integrity unit did their job. They really rolled up the sleeves and took a hard look at it. My experience is that doesn't always happen. So kudos to the Missouri prosecutor's office for really doing their job. And one last thing I can say, what they said in their letter is a prosecutor's job is to seek the truth before, during, and after a trial. And that is so true.
Yes, it is. And we are very grateful to have individuals like you and those prosecutors in Missouri and elsewhere throughout the country who are working to ensure that everything was done right and that innocent people are not held any longer in prison or in any way held down by society for something that they did not do. And so can you remind our viewers where they can watch that HBO special and when?
Yeah, it's going to be on HBO December 14th and 15th. It's going to be called The Starved Rock Murders. It'll involve my client Chester Weger, who was the person who got convicted of it. It's going to be a 3-part series. I think it'll be really interesting for everybody to watch and check it out if you get a chance.
Thank you so much, Andy. We enjoyed having you.
And I'll also have some updates on my Twitter page, Andy M. Hale Esquire, ESQ, about some of those media projects.
Great.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks. Really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.